Well, hello everyone. I'm Leon Capetas, and I'll be your moderator for today, together with other co-moderators, Magda, Haris, Clement. You see here on the screen. I can already see more than 70 people are online. This is the preparatory session for the bigger event, the in-person event we're planning for October 2026 in Vienna, for which you'll be invited soon to register. So this pre-webinar is just to get a pulse of where cities stand right now, what they're interested in, and to give an idea of what the main event will cover. It's also part of the EU Green Week. And with this, I would like to thank and welcome our speakers, Benjamin Rolls from the European Commission, where he's a policy officer coordinating urban nature policies, Heather Brooks, who's an environmental policy advisor at Eurocities. We also have with us Luis Torino from EOSA, but he's also action leader for the Greening Cities Partnership, and Carolina Cantergiani from Technalia. She's a senior researcher, climate change adaptation team. I introduced all of you at once so we can just jump into the content as soon as possible. Please feel free to say hi into the chat. Let us know where you're joining from. We'd be happy to hear also what you're interested in. Soon you'll be able to ask also questions to the speakers. So I would like to invite you, Ben, to give a welcome and a brief introduction on the NRR, how this all started. The floor is yours.
Hi, okay, thanks a lot. I mean, I just said hello to everyone in the chat because that's what you said we should do. And now I get the chance to say hello to everyone in person. It's great to have, 95 participants. That's really good. This is obviously about capacity building. So I hope that you can, the main objective of this is to build capacity, to help your understanding of the nature restoration regulation, what it means for cities, how it might affect you, and what you need to do. So it's all about sort of building preparedness, etc. I think one of the interesting things, and maybe I'm just going to talk a little bit about how the process works, how it developed, how it came to be, and of course then over time, so the European Commission comes up with a proposal, and there's a lot of political talk, and then there's negotiations back and forth with the member states, with the European Parliament. This was a hugely intensive process, but eventually a law is made, a regulation comes into force. And regulations are implemented by member states. So at this point, the European Commission's role is to support member states in implementation. And the nature restoration regulation came into force almost a year and 3/4 ago. So it's actually there. And some of you here, if you're working for cities, urban planners, urban developers, I don't know, you might not really have heard a lot about it yet. You might have heard that it's there, but you might not have had the instructions coming down from member states to say, this is what you need to do. So that's quite interesting, because something can be in force almost 2 years and hasn't impacted on you yet. And I think today you'll learn a little bit about what the process is. It's not a perfect science, implementing a new regulation. It can take time to really understand how it's going to work and how it's going to be, and there are discussions back and forth with the Commission, with member states, but I think one main takeaway message you should come away with is that it will at some point eventually, fairly soon, start to have an impact, or you will have to implement it. So that's the first thing. But anyway, I'm going to go back in time a little bit. 7 years, there was a European Green Deal. We had a new president, President von der Leyen. She puts environment way up in the priority list, where it's been way down in the priority list for many years. I would say, especially since the financial crisis of 2008. People had other things that they had to worry about. And of course, in the environment department and environmental policy makers are always saying, yeah, but don't forget about the environment, because it's in the long term, it's a really, really big, important thing, and you can't just ignore it forever. Anyway, that came about, and the European Green Deal came round, and climate change and environment were put together. We came up with a new biodiversity strategy for 2030. We had a biodiversity strategy in 2020, and it had a whole load of objectives, which we looked at. The 50 objectives of the biodiversity strategy 2020, none of them had been met. Biodiversity continuing to be in a poor and worsening state, pretty much universally across the board. Lots of species in poor condition, lots of things at risk, increasing extinctions around the world. So really, really, really concerning state of the environment from our perspective, and we're looking long term. And there was also at this time an analysis of urban environments, looking at urban nature and biodiversity, this realization that urban areas are not deserts of biodiversity, but quite the opposite. They are often now, especially in the days of industrial farming, havens for biodiversity. They are the shelters for pollinators. They are where migrating birds are stopping. They are really actually fantastic for biodiversity. And this was from biodiversity strategy, but also then in amazing piece of joined up work in the European Commission, which doesn't always happen. We're also talking about other benefits of urban nature and biodiversity, which is related to climate change, adaptation, really, really important. I mean, probably the number one most important thing, linked to water and water pollution and water regulation, linked to cooling of cities, linked to climate change mitigation, and then something we were aware of before, everyone's aware of it, the importance for mental and physical well-being of green space in cities. But I think with the lockdown and COVID, it became even more obvious to everybody how incredibly important our natural spaces are. So biodiversity strategy leads to this nature restoration regulation, and suddenly urban is in there. For the first time, DG Environment is having an urban policy, and we looked at the failed biodiversity strategy of 2020 and said, well, why did it fail? All the targets were there, they were voluntary. And that's probably why it failed, because other people had more important things to worry about. So we said, well, we're going to have a regulation, and we're going to have mandatory targets. Now, the targets are in the nature restoration regulation as a whole, they're not always set, fixed. They're things where we have to do a certain amount of analysis in other ecosystems, and member states will be setting the targets. And they're also not fixed on urban. There's the first thing is not really a target. It says there should be no net loss of urban green space between 2024 and 2030. It is a target, obviously, and it's not easy to achieve for everybody. For certain, and Heather's going to go through after my introduction the details, but for some, they might get some exemptions. But after 2030, we're talking about setting a target, what's going to be a satisfactory level. So I think this was the nature restoration regulation, and member states implement it in their own way. So they have some flexibility. It's national targets until 2030. They could implement something at a national scale and look at their green spaces and see how it's working. In some member states, they might choose to say, well, look, it's for each city has to worry about it themselves. You have to ensure no net loss, and you just tell us how you're going to do it. And in some places, they will say each individual developer or each individual development has to ensure no net loss. That already happens in some countries. In my country of birth, they have a biodiversity net gain law, which means that if you're just building a house or you're building a factory, you have to ensure an improvement in the biodiversity state as a result of this development. So very different ways of doing it. In some places, a whole region will convert a brownfield site into a greenfield site, and they will say, if you want to build a new something somewhere else, you have to invest into this development. And so there's a sort of a workaround like that. So what to expect is that you will, the most significant thing is that you will need to be measuring and monitoring your urban green space and your tree canopy cover to possibly a more high level and a more detailed level and a more official level than you would have done in the past. I'm sure if there are some cities here, all cities are already doing it to some extent. Not all cities, but a lot. A lot of you will know where each individual tree is, but this is going to be, come down as an official thing, and then you have to ensure no net loss one way or another. And after 2030, there will be this increase. The role of the European Commission after all these negotiations and discussions, because the European Commission proposes the law in the first place, then it gets agreed with the member states. So it's not, the European Commission didn't write this law, it's written by the European Commission, then the member states through the council, and then the parliament, and then they all agree it. Takes 2 or 3 years, and then we come forward with this law. But now the Commission's role is to make sure it's implemented properly by member states, and we work with the European Environment Agency. So there'll be lots of assessment and analysis done by the European Environment Agency. Member states in September this year are, and Heather will talk about this, I think, will present their national restoration plans, which will explain to us how they're planning to implement the regulation. We will then have discussions with them back and forth about how they're doing that with the European Environment Agency to see if it's going to work or not. And by September 2027, there will be a national restoration plan in place. This is probably the moment when you will, as a city or an urban planner, really know exactly what it is you have to do and how you have to do it. And then with the European Environment Agency, we will monitor progress. We use some satellite data, we use other information, we work with member states on their local data, and we make sure that hopefully, and this is the final thing I'm going to say, there is a change of direction in urban greening and the greening of urban planning. So where in the past there's been a steady loss of green space, slow in some might say, but steady throughout history of green space in urban areas, there will be a reverse of that and an increase in green space. And the final thing I would say is that it's not just about the law, it's then also about supporting this change, because the nature restoration regulation isn't going to green every city on its own. It's a fairly a very significant change, but it's more a catalyst for change, because now you've got the opportunity to say, okay, if we're going to improve our green space and nature in our city, how should we do it? Where should we do it? And what should we plant? And then we can talk about maintenance and green roofs and tree lining streets and green spaces cooling cities outside the city. All these different things now can come forward, and then we need to finance it as well. So that's where there's going to be a lot more of the EU budget is going to be available for biodiversity in the future. It should be by next year 10% of the whole EU budget. It's probably not going to be all spent, but hopefully there should be financing for green infrastructure, nature-based solutions in urban contexts as well. So good luck, enjoy this seminar, and I'm hoping to come in October to Vienna as well and talk with you more then and support this continued capacity building, because that's the important thing now. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Benjamin. It's always a pleasure to hear from you, and I think it's also very useful for our cities and regions joining here, because sometimes you know how it goes. There is a new regulation, you just find it on your desk without knowing the background. And as you've said a few times, it's not just the letter of the law, it's the spirit of the law. It's understanding all the engagement that has happened before it lands on the municipalities' desks. So thanks a lot for your time. Everyone, please feel free to ask questions on the chat, but we will respond to them at the end. Ben probably will not be here, but the rest of the speakers will be. Thanks again. So just to give you an overview of the agenda, we'll hear from Heather on understanding the nature restoration regulation for cities. We will have a Slido poll to understand where cities are standing, at least the cities that are here with us today, in their implementation capacity. We'll have some examples, practical examples, best practices, including tools we can use to understand or implement the nature restoration regulation locally. We will have we will present the results of the survey. Some of you have already answered, and we will have a Q&A with you through the chat tool. And then finally, we will close with EUI capacity building description, what you can expect from us.
Okay, thank you very much. So it's really fantastic to be part of this discussion. I am very excited to hear some of the questions coming up later on. This is a really fantastic piece of legislation. So let's delve into it, into exactly what this is. First of all, my name is Heather Brooks. For those of you that don't know me, I'm policy advisor in the climate and environment team at Eurocities. And we worked a lot on the nature restoration regulation with our cities. I'm also co-coordinator in the Urban Agenda Greening Cities Partnership. There are a couple of the colleagues who are also co-coordinators here in this call. So, the nature restoration regulation. What is it and what does it aim to do? First of all, as Ben has kind of alluded to, this is about restoration, not conservation. So there's really a stepwise change here with this regulation. It's also the first EU-wide framework for restoring ecosystems and including these legally binding targets. Now, in those beautiful, colourful boxes, we have the areas for which there are targets. So I'm going to focus today on the urban ecosystem restoration target, of course, but there are targets for restoration in forest ecosystems, agriculture, marine. There's also around pollinators and river connectivity restoration, especially when it comes to, for example, the pollinators targets, this river connectivity restoration. There are other aspects that cities should be aware of because these will have a bit of an impact on the local level too. Now, overarching, as said, this is about restoring ecosystems, and there's an overall target of restoring at least 20% of the EU's land and sea areas by 2030. Now, Ben mentioned before as well that member states must prepare national restoration plan. I'm going to share a little bit in a moment about exactly what that is. But indeed, member states with this will put together all of the measures that need to be put in place to achieve these different targets. They should also identify the financing for this, so how it's actually going to be financed, and they should identify the stakeholders. And the deadline for this is there'll be a draft submission in September, so quite soon this year, and then a final submission next year. But as I say, we're going to delve into the details of this article that focuses on urban ecosystem restoration. Now, there are two kind of key aspects. So there's by 2030, and then there's post 2030. So from 2030 onwards. Starting off with between now and 2030, there are kind of two main sub-targets, and that's no net loss in the total national area of urban green space by 2030. And also no net loss in tree canopy cover by 2030. We're going to delve into some of the definitions in a second, so don't worry about that. But first of all, there are exemptions. So by 2030, there are exemptions for this aspect. So for green space, it's cities can be exempted if their green space in the urban centre and urban clusters, that's the most dense aspect of your city, if this exceeds 45%. The other exemption for tree canopy cover is in urban centres, urban clusters, and it's if this also exceeds 10%. That means you don't really need to do anything until post 2030. However, post 2030, there are no exemptions. This means the regulation applies then to everyone. From 2030, we then need to see an increasing trend in both urban green space and tree canopy cover until a satisfactory level is reached. Now, this satisfactory level has not been defined yet, But essentially, we're talking about what is an ideal level of green space and what is an ideal level of tree canopy cover. So again, I'll come into that a little bit in a moment. We're going to focus in on some of the definitions first. So what does this mean for by 2030? For the first aspect, so this no net loss in the total national area of urban green space. So that means you could technically, as Ben said, you could lose some green space in one area and gain it somewhere else, so long as there's an overall balance on a national level. Honestly, practically speaking, I believe that this is going to be easier done down on a city-by-city basis. It is up to member states, as Ben said, but let's see. And so I think it'd be very interesting to hear from you later on as to how many of our cities have actually been contacted by our national government already. So I hope that's one of the questions coming up. But for this urban green space, no net loss by 2030, the regulation includes some definitions for what green space is. Essentially, it's all vegetation. So it's trees, it's bushes, shrubs, ponds, watercourses. So there is also this blue aspect as well. Then for tree canopy cover, there's also this definition, which is quite clear, but of course that's the tree canopy cover in cities, towns and suburbs. Now, we mentioned before the exemptions are in these urban centres, urban clusters. As I say, this is it is technically defined. You can see it's a territorial unit classified in cities using this grid-based typology, but essentially what it means is the most dense aspect of your city. When we move over to this second aspect, so no net loss in tree canopy cover in urban ecosystem areas. Urban ecosystem area can be defined by a member state. It can either be your local administrative unit, so it can just be your city, or it can be two cities that are next to each other, that are aggregated together, and you draw your boundary around your two cities. So you widen the space for which you implement this no net loss. Why is that a good thing? Well, that provides a little bit of flexibility. However, there are some rules as to whether a member state can choose to use this urban ecosystem area and whether they can choose to aggregate these two cities together. And it has to be for administrative purposes. So we always choose Brussels Capital Region as the example of this. That's because Brussels Capital Region is actually made up of 19 individual municipalities. But their planning is done for greening on the Brussels Capital Region. So for Belgium will put forward a request to use an urban ecosystem area for Brussels Capital Region, where they will draw the boundary around Brussels Capital Region for all of those 19 municipalities, which means no net loss for tree canopy cover will be on this basis. Now, we mentioned before, member states have to produce national restoration plans. These need to include the measures to meet the restoration targets and also to identify any necessary financing, a very key aspect, of course. Now, I said before, this draft submission deadline is August, end of August this year, so it really is coming up soon. We understand from discussing with member states that a lot of them are well on their way with these plans, which, as you would hope, in a couple of months' time, needing to submit the draft versions. Now, there will be time for the Commission to review these, and the final submission will be in the end of August next year. Now, there's some big aspect of free space for member states to fill in this template. So there is a standardized or uniform template for member states to fill in. I think I include a link later on, but you can find all this information and we can add this into the chat box, I believe, in a moment. If you just type in the National Restoration Regulation Reference Portal, if you type that into Google, you'll be able to access all of this information. So you can yourself see the template that is uploaded on that. That's a big resource that the Commission has put together. It's a website that includes all of the latest information for linked to the restoration regulation. So within this, you can see there's, I just want to highlight quickly that there's this big gap here. So it's the summary of the preparation process, outcome of public participation and stakeholders engagement. This is why it'd be really interesting to hear from you, the cities here, as to whether you've already been contacted by your member state or not. We understand quite a lot of member states will be submitting their draft plan without having contacted or held a public consultation. They will hold a public consultation in the second round. So I'd be interested to hear where you are. We know some cities are working very closely with national environment ministries, but it's not at all equal from country to country. Now, within the National Restoration Plan, of course, there are individual sections for each of those different targets. For this target on the urban ecosystem area, member states have to explain how they're approaching this. So that urban ecosystem area, where it is you define your boundary for implementing no net loss, they have to explain whether or not they're using that, or whether they're going to, so aggregating cities together to define an urban ecosystem area. They have to explain if they're using that, aggregating cities together, or if they're just going to use the local administrative unit, so your regular boundary. And then they also just have to, they have this free text space to generally explain how they are going to meet this urban ecosystem target. So what is the national approach to this? As Ben said before, this could be on a national level for urban green space. So there could be kind of like a national strategy across the whole country, or they could explain in this space that they're going to leave it up to individual cities to work through this. Either way, this is really about rethinking the green space within our cities. It's really about rethinking, access to the space. We know how important this is, especially post-COVID, and especially during summer with heat waves. We know how important access to publicly available green space is for our cities, for the livability of our cities. And so that is what this regulation is about. It's about rethinking our cities in terms of urban planning, in terms of the green space we have. Practically speaking, of course, this will have a huge impact on urban planning. It means cities need to be rethinking building regulations. Yes, for new builds, rethinking the potential for biodiversity within new builds, for green roofs, mandatory policies maybe for green roofs of new builds. But it's also going to be needing to think about retrofitting existing buildings. We know that about 80% of the buildings standing today will still be here by 2050. That means we really need to be focusing on what's already here within our cities. We also need to think about citizen-owned land, about people's gardens. How can we encourage our citizens to de-seal their soils? How can we encourage them to increase the biodiversity? There are a couple of examples you can see here. And it's also thinking about working with the private sector, working with businesses. Maybe we can think about incentives for businesses to invest in and fund nature restoration. I will just mention here, there is some ongoing work from the Commission side around nature credits. And the idea of this would be something similar to carbon credits, so the emission trading system. There is some ongoing thinking internally within the Commission around the possibility to set up a nature credit system. And this would be a way for farmers and business to invest in nature restoration. So it's a way to try and plug this public investment gap. Now, we in the Urban Agenda Greening Cities Partnership, we ran a series of webinars last year where we had Ben, we had the Commission, the JRC, the European Environment Agency. We had a number of different stakeholders and a number of different cities come and present around this key question. So how can cities implement the nature restoration regulation? I'll make sure we put down the link to that. It's on the EUI website in the chat box afterwards. But you can see we ran through all of these different aspects here. How else can we think about cities achieving this? A couple of years ago, we worked with ICLE to develop an idea for an urban nature plan. This used to be called the Urban Greening Plan. It's changed name since then. But the Urban Nature Plan, this was a way to help cities think about how they can increase and improve the green infrastructure in their cities. So the urban nature plan, it comes forward, it's like a strategic framework to align all of your policies. So to kind of assess the policies that you have related to not only greening, but also to mobility, to building, to your climate goals, and then to set up a cross-cutting working structure. So this is really about rethinking urban planning as a whole. That means as a city, you need to bring together the different stakeholders from different departments to work together and then assess, the different policies in these different areas. It's about setting up a co-creation process. So taking it outside of the city and then working with citizens. We know we need to get citizens on board. I think in Brussels, I'm going to forget the exact figure, but I think 55% of the green space in Brussels is privately owned. So it's about getting citizens on board for greening and not sealing their gardens and their space. So this co-creation process, getting citizens on board, talking to business is going to be really crucial for this work. And then agreeing some actions, agreeing actions that citizens can take, agreeing actions that various different business and stakeholders take. It can be about working with local hospitals as well, about greening kind of these different areas. So it's about discussing and agreeing a vision of where you want to go, coming forward with some very concrete actions, responsibilities for that, and then a timeline for implementation. And then, of course, monitoring, evaluation, and reporting. What I would really stress here is, as Ben has mentioned, a big part of the restoration regulation is also about achieving Europe's climate goals. Now, coming up at the end of the year is going to be a new piece of legislation focused on climate adaptation. And of course, a big aspect of adaptation, is around greening. It's around nature-based solutions. So we really need to make sure that these things are linked up. So this sort of work should really be looking at how we can adapt our cities. I was going to say for the future, but not even for the future, for now. Okay, so where can you find more resources? I'll share the PowerPoint, of course, afterwards, but you can see these have some links here. There's this Nature Restoration Regulation Reference Portal. This has the latest guidance, technical information from the Commission. You can find this standardized template of the National Restoration Plan and go through it. It is going to be an online platform submission, but there's like a document that outlines kind of the basis of what will be included within that. And member states are the one, of course, that need to submit this. But there's lots of information there, lots of tools as well. The EU Urban Nature Platform used to be called the Urban Greening Platform. This, you can find the guidance for the urban nature plans and also several links to other aspects. I believe it's going to be further populated in the future. This is going to be kind of the space to find out some information around urban greening. It's going to link to all of the different platforms that are out there. The EUI website, so the Urban Agenda Greening Cities, as I said, we ran this series of webinars for cities of how they can implement or how they can start thinking about the urban ecosystem restoration targets from fantastic examples from different cities. We had Bristol present on the biodiversity net gain that Ben mentioned before, so about how you improve the biodiversity and make sure that all individual new builds have 10% biodiversity net gain. So we had that. We also had other presentations from Porto, for example, around providing information and free trees to citizens, encouraging citizens to green their garden, providing them with information about the right tree in the right place. So thinking about adaptation, thinking about climate change. So a number of different city examples there. So I encourage you to look at that website as well. And then I know there are colleagues from ICLE who can answer any other questions around this, but ICLE has continued to work on the urban nature plans. So that 10-step guidance of how to develop and work on an urban nature plan, looking at all your different policies, creating this working structure within your city. And they are now piloting some of these plans with a number of different cities, and they've developed some briefs and some summaries of this. So the Urban Nature Plans Plus project, you can go to their website. They involve Paris and Barcelona, but also specifically Mannheim, Belgrade and Burgast, who were testing this urban nature plan kind of framework. Okay, final thing then is Post-2030, I should mention the draft submissions of the national restoration plans need to only focus on by 2030. So only need to focus on that no net loss of urban green space and no net loss of tree canopy cover. Post-2030, so this will be for the next round of restoration plans, we need to be thinking about what is a satisfactory level, what is an ideal level of green space, and what is an ideal level of tree canopy cover. How can we define this? How can it be measured? Because it needs to be measurable. Now, Ben mentioned this is something the Commission is starting to think about. The Commission will come forward with some guidance on this, but it also needs to be kind of co-developed with Member States, because Member States need to agree on this guidance. However, I think we're clear from a city's perspective, an ideal level of green space needs to be locally defined. And needs to be, we can think about different aspects. We can think about heat stress. How much green space do you need to alleviate the urban heat island effect, the different spots in your city? Maybe it's about mapping. A lot of our cities, of course, are already doing this. A lot of you are doing this already. You're already mapping your city, already looking at the urban heat island, the hot spots within your city. You're already layering that in terms of your tree canopy cover, in terms of your green space. Maybe then it's identifying where to then prioritize actions. It can be about flooding, potentially how much green space do you need for flood prevention, stormwater management, about health, physical and mental health. And what about equal access? This is a huge aspect, and this is a huge potential, this defining a satisfactory level. It's a huge potential to get this point around just an equal access to green space, because we know that varies from kind of street to street, neighborhood to neighborhood across cities. It's not at all equal. And then finally about quality. You will have noticed the Nature Restoration Regulation, the urban articles, these are very much focused on green space and less focused on biodiversity. So what about the quality of that green space? That's going to be very important when we talk about resilience and adaptation. So can we bring that in when we're talking about defining this satisfactory level? Again, it really needs to be on a local level, and perhaps the urban nature plans can be a way to help kind of bring that together and define it on a local level. Now, I mentioned these already, but just to say, when the national restoration plans, the draft is submitted, the Commission will review those drafts and within 6 months, and they will provide comments to Member States. Now, the Member States need to then take into account those comments when they then submit the final version of their national restoration plan next year. Now, there is this implementing act. So this is the Commission's guidelines that they will come forward with on this satisfactory level definition. I should say this is the satisfactory level definition on urban ecosystem. There are other, the 2028 deadline is also for others, but there are other satisfactory level definitions that the Commission will be coming forward with on pollinators, for example. Post 2030, we're going to see an increasing trend in pollinators until a satisfactory level is reached. So the Commission will also be working on these things. But 2028 is the final deadline, but we know that they are already starting to think about this. So we should be too. I do have a couple more slides on the data, so where some of this information comes from, but I'm aware of time. So I can stop there, and if there are particular questions, maybe we can come to a bit more of the data.
Great, thank you, Heather. This was super useful, and I think people got many answers and probably renewed their questions, but a little bit more on a deeper level now. Some of these questions are already in the chat, so you could skim through. I can see Harry's already answered and shared some resources. Anna Bruin from ICLEI as well provided some links to all the nice work done under UNP Plus as well. And Ben also responded to one question on funding. There are a couple of answers from Portugal and Finland on what you asked, whether the municipalities have been contacted. But we can hopefully, if we have time in the end, we can discuss more openly. Let's move to the next slide. Now, this is the more interactive part of the webinar. we would like to understand a little bit where cities are standing right now. So we've created this readiness pulse. There is a QR code for this slide. You can use your phones to scan. So the question here for the audience is, which best describes your city's current situation? So, do you have an urban nature plan? Where are you currently developing one? You have a plan, but you feel there is a need for updating. You have a plan and now are implementing it, or you actually do not know or you're unsure. If we can move to the next screen so we can start seeing these responses. Okay. First comes, I'm not sure, not directly involved. Okay. We do not have an urban nature greening or biodiversity plan. Comes second. Already, I think there is some statistical significance here with 60 responses. You have a plan, but it needs updating. So based on the majority of answers, this is quite a topical issue. There is clearly a need to focus more on urban nature plans and how these are delivered. So starting with the resources we've already shared is a good step. Let's see. I think the number looks pretty stable at 62 responses. So we can move to the next question. Now here, the next few is, you can respond from 1 to 4, not yet addressed, partly addressed, mostly addressed, or strongly addressed. Our city has clear targets for nature and biodiversity. Next slide, so we can start seeing the responses. So partly, there are some targets, but this could be strengthened. Some cities, the minority, however, less than 10%, you feel that there are strong targets and clear indicators. Overall, it feels there is room for improvement, and even if there is a plan, it's still on a very generic form. Let's move to the next question. Our city has indicators, data and monitoring arrangements for urban nature. So clearly there is a connection between the previous question. You have some targets, for instance, plant more trees. Then you need to develop the indicators, the mechanisms, the monitoring investment, I would say, to understand whether you're meeting those targets or whether there's a need for adaptation measures. Let's see what responses we get. Again, this is obviously understandable and explained by the previous question. So, as we could expect, the targets are not very clear. So, by extension, their monitoring and the data collected could also be strengthened. That's very useful to know. And we could jump to the next question again. Citizens are involved beyond one-off consultation. We know that many programs for greening, for climate adaptation, do involve some requirements for citizen engagement, but sometimes these are done in a very basic level, if I could say. It's a one-off consultation. There is no time, there are no resources. Sometimes there is no technical expertise in municipalities to do a very detailed participatory process. So I'm curious to see, for such a topic where citizens can actually have a contribution. We saw in Heather's presentation the role of citizens, businesses, private spaces. They can contribute to greening targets. Let's see the results we're getting. So some cities, the minority, less than 10%, are involving citizens beyond a one-off consultation. The majority, not so much yet. There is a very clear sign here that there needs to be more effort, more tools, more funding, more expertise going in this direction. And the next question, something that we all face, like municipal departments not communicating to each other, sometimes the departmental or sectoral silos. How much would you say your different departments collaborate? It could be the planning department, the greening and maintenance department, the strategy and the finance departments. There needs to be some collaboration taking place in order to do this effectively. Let's see the first results as they appear. Okay. Mostly it's partly done, which is a good sign, 24% and 50%. So it looks there are some informal or formal working groups where we can see some collaboration in the context of urban nature. Let's give it a bit more time so we get more responses. And now the final question. The nature plan is aligned with climate, mobility, land use, and health policies. We understand that there are many requirements for reporting for cities, the Sustainable Urban Mobility Plan, land use planning, health policies, climate adaptation, climate mitigation policies, and now there is a nature policy. But we do know that nature has co-benefits across these different policies, can have co-benefits. So it'd be interesting to know how much these connections are identified and strengthened. Let's start seeing the results we get. Okay, mostly not yet addressed or partly addressed. Again, this is anonymous, so we're hoping there's no peer pressure here to respond more towards 3 and 4. It's not a test, and we can see that there is consistency on not yet addressed or partly addressed. Perfect, thank you. And next one, there is financing for implementation and maintenance. Sorry, I thought the previous one was the last question, but we have one that tries to encapsulate all these answers and make a prioritization. So let's see how much financing goes into maintenance. Clearly, the majority of you feel that more funding could go in this direction. We saw this also in the questions and answers in the chat, but also maintenance is always struggling for more budget. Maintenance departments can be understaffed, have limited sometimes technical capacity. So there is, with this new requirement for more green, there needs to be an equivalent increase in maintenance budgets. Okay, next one. Regulation incentives or policy tools support delivery. Thank you, Ben. I see that you have to leave. Thanks for your contribution. It's always a pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Good luck.
And let's start seeing the answers. Again, it makes sense based on also what we saw in the previous questions and answers. Next one. Sorry, something. I felt that this would be on a single list of questions. I thought this part was in the prioritization. In any case, we can still vote. The plan considers ecological links between municipal boundaries. So obviously, you all talk about ecological corridors, how different municipalities are connected through nature, continuity, green corridors, connecting also with sustainable mobility. So this requires also cross-municipal collaboration. Next slide to see the results. Okay, this is encouraging. We can see that municipalities collaborate with each other, more than half to some level. And next one, this is the final one, actually, where we're asking you to prioritize among all the things that you've answered so far, what would be the top 3 actions that would make a difference in your city? So you should be able to see the different options. Once you select the top 3, you're able to shift between them by dragging and dropping between the first, second, and third place. I can expect that this voting will be a little bit slower because it requires a little bit more effort. We didn't tell you, we invited you here to do quite a bit of work. So thanks a lot for this. Let's start seeing the responses. Political mandate, absolutely, absolutely. Stronger regulation, more funding, which is dedicated for greening. These come as top 3 right now. While the others, it makes sense, are derivatives of the first 3. So it makes sense that you want to build a strategy, you want the political commitment, and then the rest can follow. So these are very useful results for us. And this will inform also the sessions we will have at the in-person event. I would like to thank you a lot for this data you helped us collect, but also trying to structure together with you where you see the priorities at your local level. Right. So thanks a lot again. And please feel free to visit this resource. You will see it in the information we'll share after the event. This is something developed by the Greening Cities Partnership on how to do policy readiness self-assessments. Similarly, UNP Plus project has even more detailed assessments which you can use with city examples. I'd like to invite Luis, if he's ready, to present the work that has been done in Pontevedra. So I think Luis has some difficulties in presenting. So I would like to invite you, Carolina, to, in the sake of time, to present first, and hopefully Luis can join us after this.
Thank you for the invitation, first of all. I'm Carolina Cantergeni from the Climate Change Adaptation Team in Tecnalia. And this is not indeed a city practice, but we have case studies. And it's not also a tool, but it's a methodology that may be useful for you because it's very much aligned with what was presented. And it's a methodology for quantifying the demand for green infrastructure at local level. Hopefully, it's useful for you, at least to know that you have these available. So just starting, this will be a spoiler for October, so it will be very brief. I will use less than 10 minutes to do so. And just to contextualize, this is a project that we developed in funded by ESPON program. And ESPON has a lot of activities in the target analysis kind of activity. There were some stakeholders proposing us to develop this content that is indeed the action plan, the action number 1 of the urban agenda for the EU Greening Cities Partnership. We created a consortium. Tecnalia is leading this consortium, and the European Forest Institute and the Institute for Urban Excellence, the previous ISOCARP, is also part of this project. Here we have the case studies. I will show them a little bit later. And this is the methodology that we have created and I want to share here. It may be already available in the website. I'm not sure if it is already, but it was about to be because we have the ESPON seminar next week that will be presented. And some characteristics of this methodology is the modularity. We have created in 6 modules. It's not linear, and it's we can start in each module that you want according to your needs. The scalability is a good characteristic as well. We have used 2 scales. Have proposed it. You can work in urban scale or urban peri-urban that we called landscape scale. And it's flexible in the sense that the available data, if you have local data, it's perfect. If you don't, we propose a lot of European data that could be used to develop these modules, as well as the capacity. There are a lot of methodologies and tools mentioned available there that requires different levels of capacity and expertise to deploy. So this is a summary of the methodology that we have created, and we have define some actions, and for each of the actions we have a sequence, we also have a checklist, we also have the data needed. So it's very much detailed, but here I'm just giving a brief on what is there. The 6 steps goes from definition of local policy goals and baseline analysis to inform planning. So the steps 1 and 6 are a little bit more conceptual, and the first one is just to set the scene, to understand what are the goals, to understand what are the challenges, and to work on the baseline that is available to start this deployment of this methodology. While the step 6 is how to use everything that was available, that was created during this methodology to inform planning. In this case, not only the urban nature plan, but also any other plan that you want to develop at urban level that would use the green infrastructure as input, such as mobility, NBS plan, climate change adaptation plan, health, etc. So there are a bunch of urban plans that could use the results of this methodology. And the steps from 2 to 5, it's very much data driven. So on step 2, it's how we define the green infrastructure demand. In this case, we have to understand first what are the challenges of the municipality, and we map these challenges, and then we're able to recognize what are the areas where we have demand for GI. And step 3 is a little bit parallel. Instead of having the GI demand, we are getting the GI provision. So in this case, we map the GI if it's not yet mapped. Some municipalities already have this map very clear. And then we select, and this is very key point action in this methodology, in how to identify the ecosystems, how to map them, and from there, and with the provision, we can see we can understand what is the GI provision already set in the municipality according to ecosystem services. And then step 4 is the mix and the overlap of these results of step 2 and 3. So when we overlap the demand and the provision, we have some map of unmet demand, and that's what we have to work with. And then we understand where the hotspots are. To then go to step 5 and to really be able to plan the deployment, we have to understand the opportunities that we have to consider externalities. We may have to consult the stakeholders to have a different department discussion within the municipality to really be able to, from these hotspots, to prioritize the areas to deploy the green infrastructure, and from there to inform the planning, as I mentioned before. In this project, we have some key outputs. The main one is the online user manual. It's not a tool as such. It could be in the future, but by the moment, as I mentioned, it's about to be published in the website of ESPN, and it goes for each model can get information, and it's a very friendly interface. We also have the case studies dashboard that helped us to refine the methodology. We have validated these in 6 case studies. And we have some technical resources that is really important. They are embedded in the user manual as annexes, but I just wanted to mention here that besides the general ones, it's the glossary, enablers and barriers, and a repository of good practices, we have some very specific annexes for the methodology implementation that can be useful for you independently. So it's we did an overview of your policies related to GI. We have a list of available European data sources in case you don't have local data, where you can find what data is available European level. We have some data requirements for this methodology development in case you want to go from step to step. And we have some trigger questions because sometimes it's really difficult to identify the challenge. So how to identify? We have helped you with some trigger questions. We have a list of tools to support the deployment of this methodology. We have the list of GI types that we use in our case studies, although the municipality can already have a map of GIs with their own classification. And the last point is very interesting. I think it's very aligned with the nature restoration plans. It's the ecosystem service evaluation. So for each of the urban ecosystem services that we consider in this, we have how to map and how to evaluate them. Sometimes with a some complex methodologies, and sometimes with the proxies that we included to support this evaluation. And in the project, we have multiple reports that may be helpful for you as well. In terms of case studies, we have tested in 6 case studies that are presented here. Luckily, they were very heterogeneous, so it really helped us to verify and refine the methodology. I'm not going into it now. Maybe in October, I'll go in more in detail. So we have these challenges that are very different. We have accessibility, we have flood risk, heat stress, storm, we have air pollution. So for each of these case studies, we have some different aspect to work. Some of them we really work with modeling, for example, invest. Some of them use it both urban and landscape scale. With some of them, we developed a map of combined risks that was important for them. Some of them we had issues on local data, so we used European data, and we managed to work work with the scale, the resolution. So these were very different. The reports are available if you want more information. And the good practice is very, very nice, and it helped us to lead to the conclusions of this project. Before, well, I don't want to give you conclusions on the project itself. I try to summarize here conclusions in relation to nature restoration regulation, how this can be useful and aligned to what was presented. First of all, the SPONGIL, that is in methodology, may provide delineation of existing potential GI, which is useful for increasing knowledge at least, and regulation plans and nature regulation plans. It is linked to ecosystem services, so we can have a better planning of GI, and we understand clearly where the opportunity and the needs are. It is an evidence-based analysis, so we have data, we have results, we have maps, and so it's helpful to prioritize investments in green infrastructure. It is focused to responding to urban nature, not functional naturalization. Of course, have biodiversity goals, climate actions in terms of mitigation and adaptation. So it's based on ecosystem services. So I think it's helpful as well to focus on these goals. And finally, our message is that we should go from gardening to planning GI. So it's not just about planting trees and having a new garden or park, but how do we plan, how would we consider ecosystem service, how it really is useful for our cities. So the message is that this would help to promote renaturalization with purpose. So this is the message that I wanted to give, very, very fast, but hopefully we can extend a little bit more on this in October. Thank you very much.
Thank you too, Carolina. This is very interesting work, and congratulations for your work with ESPON. What I particularly liked is the shift from targets on how much green space you have, but towards ecosystem services. And that's what also I see in the comments, that it is about the ecosystem service that green space provides, so the demand side and the supply side, as well as you answered one of the questions in the chat regarding 330-300 rule. You probably didn't see it, but it came before you presented, where we tend to see that there are many cities that practically cannot meet this rule because there are spatial constraints, but it's a very good for the aspiration and the target towards which some cities can work. Let's jump to the next presentation. Luis, I hope your connection is stable now and you're able to connect.
Hi, good morning. Yeah, unfortunately, we have no very good sound, so I think we can share the presentation of Luis, which is an excellent example from Pontevedra in the email and PPT that we'll share with participants. So good morning, everyone. The webinar is not only a teaser event, which gives you a first glimpse of topics, examples, knowledge that will be explored in more detail than at a larger scale during the in-person events that will take place in Vienna in the 19th to 23rd of October week, and the date will be confirmed in the next days. This is also an opportunity for us to learn from you, to understand your needs and challenges, and to collect knowledge, examples, initiatives, perspectives that we may not have, so that the larger event in Vienna in a few months from now can be effective, efficient, and inclusive. Now, earlier in the webinar, we had a big slide or readiness pulse poll where we captured a quick live snapshot of where participants feel their cities stand in relation to the different aspects of NRR implementation readiness. In parallel, and over the past weeks, we also organized a more extended survey alongside the webinar registration and promotion. This survey is still open and it will be open for a few more days, and you can access it online via the EUI website, and I will share the link in the chat. The purpose of this survey was to help us understand what cities, authorities, and stakeholders need, what challenges they face, and how the main in-person capacity building event in Vienna should be designed to be useful and practical. So in this very short interactive session, I will focus mainly on what this extended survey results tell us, and then I will open also, we can open the chat, which is already open, of course, to hear directly from you. And we've seen like cities from Lisbon, Porto, Bucharest, Poznan, Nicosia. We have a lot of participants coming from cities, and that's fantastic. Can we please move to the next slide? So what our pre-webinar survey tells us, the result tells us, first of all, cities and local authorities want to understand what exactly does the nature restoration regulation require from them. They also want to know how restoration objectives affect, how restoration objectives can be integrated into planning and development decisions. What is also important is coordination is a key concern. How should cities work with national authorities, regional authorities, neighboring municipalities, and other stakeholders? Also, data is another major question. What indicators, baselines, and monitoring systems and processes will be needed? And finally, financing and delivery are also central. How can urban nature restoration actions be funded, implemented, and maintained over time? And of course, for this topic, we need to say that there are a lot of tools and knowledge that have been already produced by EUI, the Urban Agenda for the EU Partnership on Greening Cities, other sister partnerships, and of course, other organizations and initiatives. So the main key takeaway is that awareness of the NRR is growing, but there are still questions around what implementation means in practice. And this is exactly the gap that the capacity building event in Vienna, the in-person event, will help to address. And these are like the main key takeaway messages. I will not enter into details. We can share that afterwards. But of course, the survey is still on and will be active, and we still encourage you to fill it out. Can we go to the next one, please? So how we're going to respond. So the message is quite clear. Cities are looking for concrete ways to move from understanding the NRR to implementing it. So where cities ask for interpretation of requirements, the event should help clarify planning, integration, and implementation pathways. Cities ask for other cities' examples that are best in practice. So the event will bring in practical experiences from cities already taking actions. Where cities ask for practical tools and guidance, the event will help translate NRR requirements into local action through hands-on workshops, harnessing practical tools already tested. And I think today we saw one of those tools developed by ESPON and the Greening Cities Partnership presented by Carolina. And where cities also asked for expert advice and peer learning, the event will also create space for interaction with experts and peers. Finally, last but not least, cities asked for funding and innovative financing approaches. So the event will also look at financing and delivery models, and we bring in knowledge already developed on that topic. Help us shape the in-person capacity building event. We would like to hear from you, and we invite your input in the chat. We already have this extended survey, and also through the slide or readiness files. Now we would like to complement this with your reflection. So please feel free respond to one or more questions on the slides. Is there a challenge missing from the survey results or what we discussed today that you would like to see addressed in the capacity building event in October? Are there any cities, projects, or experts you would particularly like to hear from during this process, during this event? Would your city or organization be interested in sharing a challenge, a case study, or experience during the capacity building session. So please share your answers. Short answers are very welcome. You can share also your city name, a project, an expert, a tool, or simply a question that you have already done through the beginning of the meeting, which could be addressed. So I can pause for a moment and also look at the chats. First of all, we had a few comments and a few suggestions from, for example, from Finland, the Ministry of Environment, which has been preparing a national restoration plan for urban ecosystems in January 2025, and has connected its largest cities with the association of through the association of Finnish municipalities. We have another comment from Laura Mostacho from Spain, where they work on green infrastructure and nature-based solutions in rural province in Spain with 165 municipalities. So please share your thoughts and comments in the chat. We can keep them as we move forward to the design of the Vienna in-person event. Let's see, is there anything else we could take from the chat? One Day Cities Festival hosted by the City of Paris, the UNP Plus project. Thank you, Anna, for this input and also for your comments. And maybe we can, Leon, what do you think? Should we move on and keep the chat rolling?
Yeah, let's do that. So we can hear from Magda. We have 7 minutes.
Hi, everyone. I'm Magda Baidan from the EY Permanent Secretariat from the Capacity Building Unit. I was thrilled to be in the organizing team of this webinar, and I hope to see as many of you as possible in Vienna in October. Thanks very much, Harris, for sharing the survey results. I have dropped in the chat the link to the survey to which you can still contribute today. So feel free to go and share with us what you really need from us, from this event in Vienna. This will be taken into account, and it will help us shape the event in a way that it best fits your needs. So it can be as hands-on, as practical as possible, just to make sure that you will leave with what you need from this event. Thank you very much also to our speakers. I'm sorry that you didn't get to hear from Luis, but you will get his slides. Thank you very much to Benjamin, to Carolina, to Heather for setting the frame of what is going to happen, of what's been happening already for 2 years now, Ben said, and what cities will need to implement very soon. And then walking us through the details of how this can be done on a very practical level. I think that maybe one other element that you can use in working with this regulation is maybe something that the EY can provide. So perhaps we can go to the next slide, please. Just to briefly show you what we do, what we are. So this is a European Urban Initiative, providing several types of assistance and help and knowledge to cities and urban authorities throughout Europe. You might know about innovative actions. This is probably one of the best known elements that we provide within the EUI, which funds innovation brought by cities, and basically allowing cities to test some things, some projects, some ideas, which wouldn't normally be funded by any classical, let's say, funding mechanisms. There is a call open now. It's going to be open until the 15th of June. It's the last call, the fourth call of Innovative Actions. So if anyone in the participants list is planning to apply, I hope you're already halfway through. We also provide knowledge and capitalization, let's say information. This means that if you have any questions or wish to find what other cities have been doing on urban matters, on sustainable urban development matters, if you wish to find potential partners in projects or in collaborations, then you should go to Portico. This is our platform for urban knowledge, and it is a universe. I really recommend you to go create an account and check it out. In any case, if you are going to Vienna, you will need an account to register to events. So it's important. You also might have heard, because I saw that we already mentioned in the chat, the urban agenda for the EU and its partnerships, focusing in detail on several very relevant topics. The Greening Cities partnership has really flooded into our webinar and event, because we are using several elements that were created within this partnership, and you might have understood that the various questions that you received on the Slido are a way of reformulating this self-assessment tool that was created within the partnership. And finally, the capacity building. So this is my unit, and I'm happy to share with you what we propose and what you should apply to. So if you can go to the next slide, please. We have 3 key activities in the capacity building offer. The events, this you might know because you are here. And as my colleagues told you, we are going to have a second step in this NRR event, which is going to happen in Vienna. I hope that registrations will open very soon, and I will be writing to you all, because we should have your email addresses to let you know when this happens. If this webinar piqued your interest, then I'm sure that in the event you will receive much more information. You will get to hear other city cases be presented. You will get to network with cities working on the same topics as you. So it's really worth looking into that and joining us in Vienna. We also provide urban authorities with more, let's say, focused formats, such as city-to-city exchanges or peer reviews. The exchanges allow cities to visit other urban authorities in Europe, or to receive delegations from these other cities on very specific elements, on very specific matters. You want to see what another city across Europe does on a specific topic. You want to see how they handle a situation. Then you can go and check it out, and they can come and give advice on what you are actually facing in your city. It's really practical, it's really hands-on, it's extremely flexible in the sense that you can really decide what you want to do in this exchange. And it's really fast in the sense that when you apply, if you're approved, 1 month later, you can already start organizing your visits. And then the peer reviews, which are focusing on Article 11 cities and their strategies, which means that this is a way of these cities' strategies to be peer reviewed by other urban specialists, people working within cities in Europe who have experience on those topics, and who will be able to give you very concrete advice on challenges that you are facing at the strategic level. I will share with you in that email that I mentioned links to all these formats. The city-to-city exchange call is open all the time, so you can just apply, or you can also apply for an assistance package, which means it will be able to help you identify those cities in Europe which are best fitted to respond to your challenges. The peer review call has specific deadlines, except for the role of peer reviewer. This is the role of the persons working in cities who can share their expertise. That call is always open. And for the cities under review, so the Article 11 cities getting their strategies analyzed, we have a new call opening early October. I think that this is it for me. I am at your disposal if you have any questions. My whole team is available. You can book online meetings with us whenever necessary, directly in our agendas, and we are more than happy to discuss with you and to answer any questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Magda. So there's a wealth of opportunities there. It's not just the in-person event in Vienna. And I'd like to thank our speakers, our moderators, the audience, of course, who gave 1.5 out of their time, as well as for their opportunity. They gave us hard work to prepare for the meeting, to make it as engaging and relevant as possible. we'll take all your comments into consideration. We know we answered some of your questions, some remained unanswered in order to discuss them in in October in person. Thanks a lot, everyone, again, and we look forward to receiving you in Vienna in October. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.